then follow.
Did you run my land?
Thousand generations to the Diva. Here we go.
So obviously I'm very excited to talk about Next Exit with you today. Congratulations on the film. I watched it a few days ago. It's a really interesting, exciting film. Obviously it's about a world where we can communicate with ghosts. So my first question, I was really interested to know, have you ever had an experience with ghosts? Is this something that inspired the film for you?
I mean, many. I'm a believer in ghosts. I think I'm what is called a sensitive, I guess. And so I've definitely had a lot of experiences. I grew up in a house that was notorious for a woman getting murdered and for being haunted, and a bunch of families not being able to stay there, and me, my mom, and my sister moving in. And I think the perspective from very early on for me was, I remember going home and hearing at school that there was a ghost in our house, and I told my mom, and she said, "Don't worry, she's another single woman. She'll take care of us." And I was like, okay, cool. And that was the thing, is like, I was never, and also being raised by my father, who like had shrunken heads and skeletons and all that type of stuff around. And I was never raised to be scared of any of that stuff. And so for me, I wanted to create a world in which they existed. We saw a shift in reality. And then we got to have more of a character study conversation about what that does to people. For me, this is always a character study. There's an element of sci-fi, there's an element of supernatural, but really that's all in the background of these two characters' journey and the people that they meet along the way. That was always the most important thing for me, was figuring out kind of how people deal with adversity and change. And when one thing changes and when life is uncertain, how do you get through it? And for two people who both, this world and this life wasn't what they had wanted and wasn't what they had hoped, and they weren't able to figure it out, if there is a way out, what does that mean about staying in it?
The film's had a great reception so far. It premiered at Tribeca earlier this year, where it actually won the award for Best Cinematography. Was this something what was your reaction to that? Was it something you were ever expecting, or?
I never expect anything good to happen, so I'm always pleasantly surprised when it does. No, Tribeca was wonderful. The cinematography was a surprise, to be honest. I think because it's just such a naturalistic experience. I worked with Azuli, who's traditionally a documentary DP, and has kind of gone back to documentary since then. And for me, I wanted to feel like we were capturing these characters and what they were going through and not creating them. And trying to make that as natural as possible. So I was very happy with it. I think I always expect the films with the bigger budgets and the more showy shots to maybe win that. But it was nice. It was, an honor and very exciting to have happen.
It is a sci-fi movie, and sci-fi is the genre where obviously you can do anything that you want. You can go to space, you can do whatever you like. What was it about this particular story that you felt needed to be told?
I can't handle death. I'm very bad at it. And I had a couple of deaths in my life of people that I was very close to, and it doesn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me. And I looked into different religions. I looked into different ideas and beliefs. And for me, none of it really gave me any type of sense of ease. And oddly, I had to create this world because this one was the one that gave me the most hope. And it definitely came up in the writing of this. I think I've probably explored it quite a bit, so I do feel like it's something that I can kind of ease up on and focus on other things. But yeah, these are all just kind of the MALI ELFMAN ghost universe and what I believe in.
I mean, we've spoken already a lot about death and the afterlife and the dark themes of the film, but it's very funny. There's a lot of comedy in the film between the two lead actors. Was this something that you thought was important to sort of balance out the darkness and the lightness with this comedy?
I think it's dire. I think especially in times right now, I find it very hard to watch something that's just completely serious and intense and talking about the subject matter that we're talking about. It kind of becomes just too much all at once. And I think there's enough darkness and trouble and challenges in the world today. I wanted to be earnest to those experiences, and I wanted to talk about those experiences, but I really didn't want to dwell in them. And I did want to hopefully make this a fun trip for people to go on. Because even in my darkest moments, and even when I'm struggling with something, there are moments of laughter, there are silly things that happen. And I think that's the funny thing about life, is whenever you're trying to be serious, it doesn't always let you be. And I was trying to capture that in the film.
So what advice did you give to the actors, to Katie and Rahul, while you were filming, to sort of get them to understand that balance between comedy and tragedy in the script?
I don't think I actually, honestly, Rahul got it immediately. Like that is kind of Rahul. So there was no convincing. And Katie, again, takes things a little bit more seriously. So it was just reassuring her that this would work. But for the most part, I actually gave them completely separate directions in most scenes. And it's imperative that they take it entirely seriously. And then you let them play. But both of them, I was very lucky, kind of trusted me with the tone of this film, which was a very scary one. And so we would dig into the backstory of these characters and why these scenes were important, but then we would just kind of let it flow on the day. I think people can make filmmaking very serious and very strict and treat it like it's very hard. But if you just treat it like it's just a problem to solve and a great time and act very calm, it kind of just flows. And that was definitely the environment that I wanted to create for them.
So I want to talk about the ending really quickly. Did you have that planned from the start of the script, or was that something that came naturally as you were writing? What was the process?
I definitely shifted through that ending. And originally, before COVID, it was actually a much darker ending, which I'm sure isn't hard for you to imagine. And I was like, I cannot do this. The world is so dark. People are so scared. Depression is everywhere. And also the responsibility of the subject matter when you're talking about depression, of making sure that you give a message that if anybody was triggered by it, hopefully gives them hope. And so that was imperative for me. And I'll be honest, there was like 8 more tricks I wanted to do in that final sequence that if I had a little bit more time and money, I would have loved to have done. But yes, that was always more or less the intention of it. The one thing that kind of unites us all and unites all the different religions that I've looked into is what we do here matters.
I mean, it's not particularly a happy ending, but there's definitely a sort of optimism and a hope. So you felt a responsibility to kind of explain that to the audience as you were going through with the ending?
I think so. I think there was probably more ambiguous endings as well. And I didn't want that either. I didn't want it to be straight happy, and I didn't want it to be ambiguous or straight dark. I think for me, being honest to the tone of what the rest of the film was, it needed to be something in the middle. And it's funny because I've been reading, I read all the reviews and I read everything. And one of the things is like saying that I don't answer all the questions. And my answer to that is yes, that's very intentional. It's emotional experiences and working through stuff. You often don't get to an end in which you're like, now I have solved it and I know everything about myself and life and I'm good to go. You're like, all right, now I get to start trying. Now I get to try to figure it out. And for me, that's just where these characters are. There's a whole road trip back to New York that they got to do where they're going to work on so many other issues. But for me, it's just that first step of accepting that there's an issue that you got to work through and saying, yeah, I'm okay to try that. Is
this a world that you'd like to go back to in the future, the world of life beyond and the whole story, maybe with different characters or continuing their journey? Is it something that interests you?
I mean, I would love, there's so much mythology that I didn't get into. There is a whole bigger sci-fi film that I would love to make. Because also Dr. Stevenson has just invented this. This is just these are the first pioneers that are going over. These are the first people that we're testing. What happens then? What happens with the whole Congress and shutting her down, and why should politics have anything to do with this when this is a study that people are willingly participating in? I mean, there's such a bigger sci-fi world that I would love to, there's so many different you could follow these characters forever because I love these characters and I could stay with them forever. But the more interesting thing for me would be what else happens to the world in this time and what happens to this study. I would love that. I don't know that anybody's asking for that, but if you can convince a bunch of people to give me a bunch of money, I will happily write that.
Okay, I'll try.
That'd be great.
So what is the one thing that you want people to take away from this film? When the credits roll and they're left to think about it, what's the one thing that they should take away? What
they want. And I mean that in all sense, what they want from the film, but also what do you want? What is it that you are not doing and that you want, and why you are not doing that? What is keeping you from doing that? What are the things that you have built up that you can't get over? Why are you stopping yourself from doing that? And And then the idea of looking at what scares you and then thinking maybe you can handle that, or maybe if you look at it from another perspective, maybe it's actually not that scary.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and congratulations on the film. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Jack. I appreciate that.